So this week's Parsha, as everyone saw the little image, is V'hoya Eikev Tishmo. The word means Eikev, literally means when, which means when you will listen to the Torah, when you listen to what God wants, He'll give you He will keep the covenant which He made with our forefathers. Page 1104. Now the word Eikev literally can also mean a heel, like the bottom of the foot. And like as Jerry points out, Yaakov, the name of our forefather and the name of one of the names of the Jewish people, is also named after this heel. He was grasping on Esau's heel when he was born. So there's V'hoya Eikev Tishmor, and it will be when you will listen, or it will be when you listen to the heel. And there's a third meaning to the word Eikev. It means at the end of times. In Aramaic, the word Eikev comes from Ikvata de Mashiach, which means the end of times, right before Mashiach comes. And I think we'll speak later about these three translations of the word, how they're connected, and what the lesson we have in life from the name of the parsha being literally a heel. Well, let's continue in the Pshat, as Margarita says. It will be when you will heed these ordinances, you listen to them, you'll guard them, and God will keep the covenant for you. So the parsha starts off with this promise, which we'll have a few more times in this book, in Deuteronomy, explaining that when you listen to what God wants, God will take care of you, God will pay you back, God will guard you, God will protect you, and give you what you need. If you want to actually read it, it's very beautiful verses. It says, He will love you, verse 13, He will love you, bless you, multiply you, bless your children, the fruit of your womb, your produce, the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine. And it lists you would bless above all peoples, there'll be no sterile male or barren female, on and on and on. God will remove all your illnesses. Now, interestingly, many of these verses are said by many people on a Matzah Shabbat, right after Havdalah ceremony. There's a section called V'yitin Lecha, which means you'll be given blessings. And it collects throughout the Torah, from Jacob's blessings, from Moshe's blessings, from different blessings in the prophets, all these beautiful, beautiful verses of blessings. And the custom many people have is to say two people together in the Siddur. So you're giving the blessing to the other person, and because the words is V'yitin Lecha, and you will be given the blessing. So it's a very nice custom that people have after Havdalah, after they make the ceremony of dividing between Shabbat and the weekday, is they give these blessings. And many of these blessings are from these verses here, which are very beautiful if you read them. We're also told that we have to eradicate the idols. We can't allow the idols to flourish in our land. And if you do, it's basically going to be a stumbling block, because you might not actually be serving them now. You might think, oh, it's nice decorations, or it's not something nice to have. It's a cultural Canaanite things, or some things just to leave it because this is one we want to remember the history, but you might end up slowly but surely falling into idol worship yourself. And anyone who's studied a little bit of the books of prophets, we're constantly stumbling and falling on it. And the archaeologists keep saying they keep finding idol worship back in the day, and that's proof that we weren't monotheistic. And if anyone looked into the prophets in the Tanakh, the prophets agree with you that people were worshiping idols. They were also telling them off. Just because they'll find the idols today in the archaeology doesn't mean Judaism didn't exist. It just meant that people were still. They might have had a Pesach Seder and had the idol in the next room. It wasn't. People didn't have the contradiction, and I don't think people necessarily have that nowadays as a contradiction as well. People don't find it as a contradiction. People have, as we spoke in For All Humankind, people have their idols. Yeah.
Decoration. Some people think it's a decoration.
Decoration, yeah.
They don't pay attention to it, but it's an idol.
So, and if you read through the verses here, he goes through a lot of interesting points about when we're going to conquer the land. And if you look at verse 22, it says, God, your God, will cast out these nations from before you gradually. You will not be able to destroy them too quickly, lest the beasts of the field outnumber you. God didn't want us to take over the land in one shot. And until we settle it and build our houses and build our communities and build up our livestock and our whatever the agricultural society, what would happen? The land will be barren and fallow, and animals will take it over. So we conquered it bit by bit. We conquered a bit, settled, conquered a bit, settled till we finally conquered the full land. It wasn't in one fell swoop. If you read in the book of Joshua, it took 7 years to conquer, 7 years to divide it, slowly but surely taking over the whole land of Israel. Then is a very strong verse 26 on page 1107. Don't bring an idol, which is an object of God's disgust, into your house, because you'll become condemned to destruction like it. You should surely loathe it and utterly detest it, for it is to be destroyed. It shows on the severity and how strong we do not like or appreciate or want to be connected with idols. An interesting point is that question.
I know. I just was wondering what is considered an idol. I didn't know that you'd use such a broad term. Would a sculpture be an idol, even if? Well,
depends on what.
I mean, it's not associated with a god or.
If it's a sculpture of Buddha, then it would be an idol.
Yeah.
If it's just many over the as we spoke last week 3 weeks, we spoke about pictures. People don't want to have graven images, but many sculptures, you have to know if there's any background to it that this was ever worshipped or not. If this shape or
if it was like African curios, I don't exactly know the origin of it. To me, I like
there's halach guidelines. If it's a currently worshipped idol, if it's a currently worshipped,
okay, I don't think.
Meaning, I'll give you an example. When I was in 8th grade, we had to learn history. So it was the 1990, right? We had the government curriculum to learn history, but you could choose which period to learn. So our history teacher chose specifically to learn Viking period over medieval Europe because both of the curriculums were full of their worship, their religion. The difference is that the Viking religion is not a practiced religion today, as opposed to the Christian Europe. It's basically the same thing that's worshipped as idolatry today. So halacha does distinguish between current idols and past religions, whatever that are past the user right there, right? You have to see. You have to know. Also, the question is, there was a bit of a controversy in Israel earlier this year when a soldier destroyed an image on camera and it became a big international. There's always considerations. You would ask a rabbi before you go ahead and do such things.
But then,
yeah.
I was just going to make that relevant to Australia and Indigenous people's perception of the land.
The land,
they associate.
So, good question. The Talmud asks you the same question. Talmud says that there were many religions that worship certain mountains or worship trees or etc. and the Talmud says that if that's the natural state, that it hasn't been formed or changed into an idol, that does not, just because this guy decided to worship it as an idol doesn't count. Then the Talmud asks him a stronger question. It says, why would God let people worship idols, worship things in the world, the creation that he created, the mountain? Why would he let that be an idol? Why would he let people worship it? The Talmud says that should God destroy the world because of the fools? Because there's some guy who's going to bow down to this mountain, so God's going to destroy the mountain. The world has to exist. God created the world. He wants the world to exist in the way it is. Because some guy decided the land is holy and is their God, and that's where they came from. I don't know, whatever it is. That doesn't mean that we can't live in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between a man-made and a natural, so to speak, mountain, lake, whatever it is. Then the next thing the Parshat goes on to describe, which is Moshe, as you remember from 2 weeks ago already, this is our 3rd week into Moshe's long speech. He describes the entire journey which God led us through the 40 years of desert. It says, in order to afflict you and to test you. It's verse 2. He afflicted you, let you go hungry. In verse 3, he fed you with manna. If you remember what the man is a miraculous food that came down from heaven. It took on physical properties, and it had a good taste. And as the Medrash explains, it was able to taste. You were able to imagine the taste of anything you wanted, and it would taste like that. But it was a godly food at the end of the day, and therefore there was no waste. People were very confused about that. Their body didn't, because it was godly food, it means everything that it had the exact nutrients that it was necessarily to be, that you needed. There was never anything that needed to be expelled from the body, which played with people's mind and perception. Their bodies were used to something when they came to the desert, and suddenly they felt that one day we're just going to explode. We have so much built up. And that was one miracle. We had the manna. In verse 4, we had our clothing didn't wear out, our feet did not swell for 40 years. These are big miracles. You think you're traveling in the desert, your clothing, your feet, so things would, you didn't need to change your clothing. No, God had kept it fresh, and we survived. In verse 5 is very interesting. It says, you know in your heart that just as a man chastises his son, so does God, your God, chastise you. What does this mean? In Hebrew is, as a person pains or chastises or makes his son upset. What's the idea? My Mendel he's not yet walking, but he's crawling. Yeah. So he's about 8 months now. So what do? You're standing here, he's crawling into Tati. He's crawling, coming into Daddy, and then I step back 2 steps. And he has to crawl a little bit more to get to me. Step back 2 more steps, he crawl a little bit more. So am I paining my son? Yeah, I'm paining my son. He looks at you. What are you doing? I want to come to you, and you're paining me. You're playing with me. But what am I really doing?
Training.
Well, yeah. If I was a really good father, I would be doing it for training and not for having fun. No, but I'm training him to not to trust people. But I'm training him to crawl. And the same thing when the child gets ready to walk. The same thing in the face. So, just like a father a man chastises his son, a man pains his son and makes him work hard and sort of plays with him, so too God was doing it to us. God was testing us. Why? So we should grow from the test. The word in Hebrew for a test is nisayon. I think we've said this in a different class. The word is nisayon, which means challenge, a test, trial.
We do both to our children anyway.
Yeah. If you take out the first 2 letters of the word nisayon, which are nun and tzamach, which are nes, which means a miracle. Or why is nes called a miracle? Because it comes from the word raised. A nes is something which is raised up in the air. A miracle is raised. So when you come through a challenge, you've been raised up. You've reached a new state. You reached a more miraculous state. So all the things that God did to us throughout the desert, and He made us, the manna was there. There was no, before we had the manna, we had matzah. Once the matzah ran out, we didn't have food. Why couldn't God have made sure we had food while we had manna and while we still had matzah? Why couldn't God have give us the manna ready so we should be calm, right? Or why did the man every day have to finish all the money you had and you have to wait for the next day for the next, is it a regular thing that you finish all the food you have in your house and only every day you go buy food from the store? It's not the way it works. You have a few days provision. Sometimes you have to stock up, but you have food in your house. But this was the way they tell stories of great righteous people like the Baal Shem Tov or different people that never went to sleep with a coin in the house. They give everything away every day. Give everything out to charity, trusting in God. The next day, money provisions would appear. These are very high levels of trust, right? So this is the same idea. God is testing us, giving us this to train our faith in God, train our belief, train our how strongly we really believe. The Rabbi Marash, Rabbi Shmuel, the 4th Chabad Rebbe, he lived from 1830, the 1830s. He was born, passed away in 1882. He said that nowadays all livelihood is really like manna from heaven. You could put in as much effort as you can, and not necessarily will you make anything. You could put in very little effort, and you will gain. So at the end of the day, even though we look like we do physical investment and working hard and getting involved in the world, at the end of the day, it all boils down to being like manna. It's all just a gift from heaven. So if you remember that sometimes, you won't get as worried about what's going on. Because at the end of the day, you could have put in all your investment and very little to show for it. You could just touch something and gain, invest in the right time and gain very much. No comments? Didn't get no pushback?
I don't quite agree with it. Sorry.
Okay.
You're trying to be glad. You provoke.
The thing is, idea and the reason we were given just enough money just for a day, and then we had to go and collect it again. Two main reasons. I'm sure there were more. One is trust, what you mentioned. You have that faith that you eat everything today and Hashem will give you again tomorrow. But for Hashem, he could just as well put that manna on a plate inside of your tent or shove it down your throat. The reason he wanted you to go and collect it was you need to work for something.
Correct.
Food on the table.
Correct.
You can't be exactly, yes. You can't have a brand of shame.
Correct. As Margarita said, that there's the idea that when you're given something and it's always given to you, you haven't worked for it, it's considered like bread of shame. You're like, it's shameful that you haven't done anything for it. This is all true that you have to work, but the Marasha's point was that at the end of the day, it's still like manna from heaven, because there's many times where you'll put in all the work and you won't come out with the results, or you can make all the money, but then unfortunately have to spend it and use it on medical bills or something. Yeah,
I think the difference to the point that you're trying to make is that you can't think that it's only your effort that's giving you the result. It's also a share.
Beautiful.
Well,
Let's bring us to the next point of the Parsha. Beautiful, perfect segue.
The thing is that it wasn't our choice to have it for one day, because whatever wasn't eaten, it was.
Yeah.
So there was that idea that you have to do something each
Yeah,
day.
correct.
And even people who thought that they're good, their one would be further away, they would have to work a bit longer. So, it doesn't really fully understanding that nothing is our effort and everything is a miracle, including our breath, on which we can argue with God.
Correct. Everything at the end of the day it's not black and white. There is always the scale. I'm just bringing out that point of the end results, not necessarily based on how much you put in. Now, if you look at verse 8, people might recognize it on page 1107. A land of wheat, barley, grapevine, figs, pomegranates, oil-producing olives, and honey-producing dates. That's the seven fruits that the land of Israel is blessed with.
Yeah.
I think many of them till today. And then there's very, very beautiful description of the land of Israel. And in verse 10 is a mitzvah that's actually taught in the Torah in this Parsha. You will eat, be satiated, and bless God, your God, for the good land he has given you. It says that you eat. That's the first point. If you're full, and you make the blessing, and that's the mitzvah of blessing after the meals. It's a biblical mitzvah. If you ever read the Birkat HaMazon, I'm sure everyone has. There's 4 blessings. With all the signs from South Africa, there's 4 blessings.
She didn't remember that way. Try to remember it without hope.
There's 4 blessings. The first blessing is the blessing on the food. That blessing was instituted by Moses, here in this Parsha. The second blessing is the blessing on the land of Israel and on the bris. The fact that God made a covenant with us, and we also do the covenant every day, baby at 8 days old. And on the Torah, that was instituted by Joshua after the conquer of the city of Jericho. The third blessing was made by King David and King Shlomo, David and Solomon in Jerusalem when we thank God on Zion. And that's, if anyone wants to know, we say every day, every time we eat bread and we make the blessings, we're thanking God for Zion, the city of Jerusalem, and for the temple there. And if that blessing finishes off, Uvanei Yerushalayim, and build Jerusalem, and these very soon. We're blessed, thanking God for building Jerusalem. And the fourth blessing is not a biblical blessing; it's a rabbinic blessing, and it's connected to this week, and we'll speak about it later. But it was Toiv HaMeitiv. It's for God who does good and will continue doing good, and it's connected to the burial of the corpses from the Beitar revolt. The Beitar revolt was Bar Kokhba, who was in the about 60 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. Bar Kokhba led a revolt and was squashed by the Emperor Hadrian. And he didn't allow their bodies to be buried, the corpses to be buried for tens of years. When he finally allowed it to be buried, which was a big deal, because as Jews we are very important. It's very important to the body comes from dirt and it goes back to dirt and needs to be buried. When he finally allowed it to be buried, they made the institute of this fourth blessing in the benching, in the grace after meals. Anyway, so that that happened on the 15th day of Av, on Tu B'Av, which is coming up this week. I'll also speak a little bit later. Okay, so that's only the first reading because we took a little bit of time, but the rest of the second reading speaks about, if you look at verse 14, which is what the segue Micah pointed, your heart grows haughty, you forget God, your God who took you out of Egypt, out of the house of slaves. And you, verse 17, you say to yourself, it is my own strength and the might of my hand that have accumulated this wealth for me. Rather, you should remember God, your God, for it's He who gives you strength to become wealthy in order to fulfill His covenant that He swore to your forefathers as today. So that's one of the, if Eugene and Margarita were here on Shavuos, we went through all 613 mitzvahs. In Maimonides' count, that's not one of the mitzvahs. In Nachmanides' count, he makes this one of the mitzvahs, 613 mitzvahs. He says, just to give a little background, there are 613 mitzvahs. We know that from the Talmud. There's no list in the Talmud of what are the 613 mitzvahs. If you start counting in Torah every command, there will be many more than 613 mitzvahs. You might have 2,000 mitzvahs, 3,000 mitzvahs. If you go looking for every time there's a commandment to do something. So, about 1,000 years ago, there were many rabbis who were trying to make a list of what are the 613 mitzvahs, meaning what can be grouped together as one mitzvah. Maybe the prohibition not to eat blood and of a slaughtered animal and blood of a non-slaughtered animal. Maybe they're the same mitzvah, etc., etc. There's many mitzvahs that can be grouped together, and the different counts. There's the most famous is Maimonides. There's Rabbi Saadia Gaon, and then there's Nachmanides. He has a distinction. He says that this mitzvah, do not forget God, your God. Do not forget that everything you have, the fact that you're wealthy, the fact that you're successful, is from God. He counts that as one of the 613 mitzvahs. And if you look in verse 19, it says that it's the danger of being arrogant. It gives a punishment that if you forget God and you go after the idols, you go after you make yourself other gods, you're not going to last very long in the land. And it's very, very interesting to look at verse 4 on page 1111. Don't say to yourself that God, because of my righteousness, God has brought me to take possession of this land, and because of the wickedness of these nations, God is driving them out. It's not because we're righteous that God brought us to the land. God chose us for His reasons. God chose the Jewish people for His reasons. It's not because we're so morally superior to the other nations, and therefore He chased out other nations, and therefore allowed the Jews to enter the land of Israel. That's not necessarily so. Look at verse 7. He says, remember, don't forget how you repeatedly angered God in the desert. You've been rebelling against God from the day you went out of Egypt until this day. So, and then it starts detailing the golden calf, which was the sin of all sins for the Jewish people, where we just got a revelation of the Torah. God had just revealed Himself to the Jewish people. 40 days later, we're busy dancing ahara around the golden calf. So it's nothing necessarily because we did something so good, therefore God's giving us the land. He has His reasons why He chose us, whatever reason it is. But you have to take that in perspective to realize that you might get exiled from the land, you might get punished. It's not because you're so great. You look at verse 10. It says when Moshe ascended the mountain, he got the luchot, he got the two tablets. They were inscribed with the finger of God, the exact words that God spoke, meaning the 10 commandments were written on the two tablets. 5 on each one, even though the second 5 are much shorter than the first 5, much less words. Miraculously, they weighed the same. They were etched through and through. Miraculously, I guess, either with the fonts or with the configuration was they were both the same weight. And after 40 days, God said to Moshe to get down because your people have sinned. They've become corrupt, and they made themselves an idol, and they're dancing around it, they're worshiping it. Go down. And God really wanted to destroy us at the time. He said, "That's it. I'll make Moshe into a nation. I'll make you into your own nation. You'll have enough descendants. You'll become the new nation of Israel." And Moshe stood up for us. He was a real Jewish leader, and he said, "No, God," and he prayed to God, and he begged God for forgiveness for the Jewish people. Now, what does Moshe do when he comes down from the mountain? Everyone knows. Moshe goes and takes the 2 tablets and he grabs them and smashes them. Why did he do that?
It's an idol. Yeah, to destroy the idols.
Why did he destroy the tablets, though? The tablets are from God. The tablets are God. They're the 10 Commandments on it. What the tablets are wrong?
They weren't worthy of it.
So very good. That's the most simple explanation. The Jewish people are not worthy anymore of the tablets. And what's the point? The tablets are sort of like a marriage document between us and God. Moshe was ripping up the marriage document and saying, "There's no evidence to any marriage. This is pre-marriage sinning that we've done with this idol." And Moshe was, if anything, taking the blame on himself. He was sticking his neck on the line, like going ahead and breaking God's tablets that He gave him. Moshe was saying, taking blame off the Jewish people and transferring it to his own head. Moshe asked God went up for 40 days to ask God for forgiveness after destroying the golden calf, and God, after those 40 days, God gave him another set of 40. God told him to go back down to the mountain and carve a new tablets, and the original tablets God Himself made. The second set of tablets, Moshe had to do the carving, and he brought them up to the mountain. God inscribed in them, and Moshe came down for the third time after 40 days. So 40 days, 40 days, 40 days. Moshe came down on a very auspicious day called Yom Kippur. And that's why Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, because that's the day that we were finally fully forgiven for the sin of the golden calf. And Moshe came down and returned the Jewish people, and we were forgiven. And the very next day after Yom Kippur was when we started building the tabernacle, the Mishkan, for God. So it was a very busy weekend then.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't eaten for months.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe when his breaks, when he came down, he ate
40 days.
40 days of not eating and drinking up there. He came down in 40 days. That's why he made it. He did make a feast the next day, but he didn't eat either.
He was too busy praying.
He was busy praying.
It's a good message.
So do we have to feel bad or guilty for our ancestors' transgressions, or how should we place that?
In Parshat Kisitisa, God says that, and every time when I will punish the Jewish people, I always add in a little bit for that
Wow.
transgression. There'll always be something because of the structure, because of the golden calf. Should we feel bad for it? We should feel bad for what we have, for what we got to fix.
You should be grateful because every time you've done something bad,
So it's bad as that.
you can say, but that's not anyway real. But you have a good.
So, and the Parsha continues about all the different travails that we spoke about in Matas Maseh, the different traveling in the desert with Aaron, and with when Aaron passed away, and the Jewish people were very sad about Aaron passing away, so they ran away. They went back a few stops. We spoke about it a few weeks ago. And in verse 8, it says that the Levites, they never felt, the Leviim, Michael's family and Daniel's family. We have two Levis here. They never felt for any of this stuff. They were always kept on God's team. They always went along with exactly what God wanted. And that's why they were chosen, to be the ones who carried the ark and led the Jewish people. Let's look at page 1117, verse 14. Verse 14, verse 15. God created the whole world, the heavens above the heavens, the earth, everything on the earth. God created it. God belongs to God. Yet of the whole universe, God desired only your forefathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you of all peoples, to this day. God chose us. It's not something we did. God wanted us. God wanted our forefathers. God wanted us. We're chosen, not chosen in a chauvinistic way. We're chosen we have a responsibility. As we spoke at length in For Humankind, we're chosen to do something. We're chosen to pass on a message. We're chosen to demonstrate. We're chosen to educate. And therefore, as it says in verse 16, we have to not be stiff-necked. We have to actually work on ourselves, overcome our natural instincts, our natural behaviors, our ways of living, our ways of acting, and fulfill our chosenness, fulfill our responsibilities.
We're chosen in everybody. He loves us and he gives us responsibilities.
Well, usually if you don't love someone, you don't give them responsibility.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's not chosen in a way some people think it's chosen and therefore superior and other people are looked down on. That's not a Jewish perspective. Well, we're chosen.
Ask teachers, are they supposed to be smarter than their students? There are a couple of teachers
Okay.
here.
As we spoke before, we kind of length that yes, we if we're not doing our right, if we would be going proselytizing, trying to convert the whole world to Judaism, then it would be like a doctor who tries, instead of healing his patients, trying to make all his patients become doctors. Right? We do have a role. We are meant to we have a role to play. We are meant to be doing something in the world that we have a role to accomplish. We're meant to be teaching. We're meant to be educating. We're meant to be a living example. It's chosen with a responsibility. Yes, we get extra love from God for that 100%. But the chosenness that many people don't appreciate here in the pasuk, in the verse, is a chosen to do something, chosen for a role.
If you're given talent, you should use it. That's the way I see it. Is it wrong?
I just can't reconcile that concept with the punishments of death that we previously, before the books of Moses, we were talking about. I just find that quite challenging to
how the Jews were killed, why God put the Jews to death. Held us on a much higher moral responsibilities.
I understand that, but it's just very hard to see something that's all encompassing, all understanding, and then yet so cut and dry in terms of like ultimate punishment.
On the space station, can the astronaut decide to light a cigarette? He just wants to light a smoke.
For scientific purposes,
For scientific purposes. Could he just choose what he wants to do? Everything in the International Space Station or on a rocket is exact, defined, perfectly calibrated for the role, for the mission. Would you say the astronaut is gonna be punished because something's gonna make an explosion up there? Is he being punished, or is he misusing the
facility,
the facilities for the exact dimensions of what he was put there for, the exact mission, the role, the purpose?
Questions. And he says we will never understand why, because if we understand, we'll excuse it. And we cannot excuse
That's interesting. That's an interesting point. But we never understand why God does what he does, otherwise we'll excuse God. Yeah, this is a slightly different track that we let's say all the terrible things that happen to the good people. Yeah, the evil. Why is evil? It's a question which half the Tanakh, half the Bible speaks about. Again and again, there's a whole book called Job, which is literally he's literally complaining about why the bad things happen to good people. It's like a question older than time.
Yes.
And what Rabbi is pointing out is that if we would actually understand, then we would say, okay, it's right. That makes sense that this is happening. And we're not meant to do that. We're enjoined to protest any negative and anything evil in this world. Let's look at verse 19. He says, we have to show love to the convert because we ourselves were strangers in Egypt. we know that feeling. What you've gone through, don't put that someone else through. We know that feeling of being the stranger, of being the odd one out. Don't put someone else through that same feeling.
But then they still have to be rigorously tested to become a Yid.
Yeah, that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
You don't have to be someone,
Yeah, that's
People
yeah.
get so-
We discuss as a whole. We discourage it,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's different situations and circumstances. It's every there's no many things. There's the rule, and then there's you have to speak about
Yeah.
the specifics.
Yeah.
But
I got
this is once it's not necessarily only for COVID. Any stranger that's amongst you, don't point them. Don't you yourself were in that. We ourselves were in that situation. Let's look at verse 8 on page 1119. We're speaking about the idea of going into the promised land, going into the land of Israel. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. The description of the Talmud is that you'll have a goat eating the oozing honey out of a date palm. The dates are oozing honey. They're so succulent with honey. The goat's eating it, and milk is flowing out of its udders because of how much milk is being produced. So it's literally a land flowing with milk and honey. And God says that this land is not like the land of Egypt. The land of Egypt, where you came from, even though we lived in the best part of Egypt, we lived in Goshen, which is the best part of Egypt. I think it's near modern, I don't know which area in Egypt today it is. It's very, very different than the land of Israel.
East bank of Nile towards Sinai.
Okay, I'll trust you. The teachers. Yeah. So the land of Egypt, the way produce grew was that once a year the Nile overflowed, and then there was the little canals, the water overflowed, and
the delta.
the water overflowed. It watered all the fields, and that's how it was natural. It's a natural thing. Maybe today not. The Ethiopians are diverting it, maybe back in the front. But this was the way Egypt was watered year after year. They even made a holiday on the day that the water overflowed. Now, the land of Israel is not like that. The land of Israel depends on rain. We're leaving one way of living to another way of living. We're leaving for a way that you could depend on the clockwork. Nature works. The water overflows, and you have rain. And you have not rain. You have water to water your fields. And now comes the land of Israel. We have to pray for rain. The rain comes from heaven, and many years it's. Which country are they constantly watching the Kinneret? What's the water level every year? I mean, a few years ago it was very full. I don't know where it is right now, but if you're constantly watching the water level, it's a constant touch and go. There's never a. I mean, maybe we're talking about the state of Victoria, but in the land of Israel, the mode of the country is that we're constantly turning upward for rain. A farmer in Egypt can know and be dependent that year to year his water is going to flow. A farmer in the land of Israel has to turn up to heaven and ask God for his rain. Look at verse 12. It's the land that your God watches over. The eyes of your God are always on it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. God is constantly has a special eye for the land of Israel. And they've reiterated this many, many times that the land of Israel is the safest land for the Jewish people. It's the safest land in the world. Let's say in the Gulf War, people were trying to escape, or also in the 6 Day War, people were trying to leave the land, and everyone was very worried. It ever pushed strongly that the land of Israel is the safest land. And we've actually seen it as Eugene spoke at length on Shavuos, we've actually seen that you'll have missiles that are the size of school buses and missing completely, not hitting. If it would hit a building, it will take out who knows what. You could have hundreds and hundreds of projectiles coming, and we're talking if tiny hits that impact it. Unfortunately, everything which happens is terrible, but you can't take away what the miracles are of this of this land. A cute idea they always say is that in the Hebrew of that verse, of verse 12, it says, "Mereshit hashana v'ad achrit shana," from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. What's the difference between the year, like the definitive hashana, the year? They say it every year at the beginning of the year. Say the beginning of like Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the secular year, or the beginning of your birthday year, or the beginning of the school year, whatever it is. You say, this year is going to be the year. And at the end, you say, okay, it was a year. It was a year. It wasn't the year. It's a cute idea, they say. And then we have the second chapter of the Shema. The Shema, we said last week we had the first chapter of the Shema. This week we have the second chapter of the Shema. We go through many of the same ideas, but here we introduce the idea of reward and punishment, which is actually one of the fundamentals of our faith, is to believe in the idea that there is a reward and punishment, both physical reward and punishment and spiritual reward and punishment, and then back again when Mashiach comes, again physical reward and punishment. And again, we're told about the tefillin and the mezuzahs, and teaching it to our children. Same thing we said last week. And if we follow this, then we will have, in verse 24, what they call Greater Israel. We have everywhere we will walk will be ours. Even territory beyond your promised border, extend from the desert in the south to Lebanon in the north, from the river, the Euphrates River in the east, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. What's called Greater Israel. That is what we're going to get in Mashiach's times as the land of Israel. And no one will stand up to you. God, your God, will cast terror upon all those near you and dread of you, and all the inhabitants of the land which you tread, as he spoke concerning you. That's the end of the Parshat. Very quickly with Haftarah, you don't have to turn there. It's also one of the Haftarahs of comfort, the second week after the Tisha B'Av. Last week was the first week of Tisha B'Av. This is the second week, continuing in Isaiah, continuing in Yeshaya, the comfort of the Jewish people when we know that our temple will be rebuilt and we will be redeemed from exile. Now, to speak a little bit about what's happening this week is the 15th day of Av. The 15th day, Tu B'Av. The 15th day of Av is, for Tisha B'Av was the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. Tu B'Av, the 15th day of Av, is one of the happiest, if not the happiest day of the calendar. And for those who were here on Shabbos, we spoke in the morning that there were multiple reasons why this is a happy day. One of them we mentioned a few weeks ago here in the class, that the Jews who were dying in the desert stopped dying, and they realized they were burying themselves every year, and they thought they miscalculated the day, and they saw that there was a full moon, and they knew that it's already obviously the 15th day of the month, and there's no one going to die anymore. The other reasons included that we also learned about a different week about not marrying out of your tribe, so the land shouldn't crisscross. Like if someone, a male from the tribe of Reuven marries a land-owning female from Shimon, their kids will be Reuvenites, the tribe of Reuven, and the land from Shimon will now go to Reuven. So you'll have mixed match. The land of Israel, which was divided according to the tribes, will all be you'll have what they call it, the land will be gerrymandered. It'll all be mixed up, and that was so
And we looked at everyone stared at me.
Yeah, we were told that you should marry into only your tribes. Later, they decided for purposes of love between fellow Jews and to take down the boundaries and the borders between Jews, all tribes were allowed to marry into each other, and that's what happened on the 15th day of Av. So it's a celebration. That's why till today it's celebrated with weddings and with dancing. And there are multiple other reasons throughout Jewish history, other reasons connected to weddings, as well as what we said before, that the dead of Beitar were allowed to be buried after the Bar Kokhba revolt. And for all these reasons, this day was considered a very, very auspicious and happy day. One last point about the 15th day of Av is that the 15th of many months are a holiday. Sukkot happens on the 15th day of Tishrei. Pesach happens on the 15th day of Nisan. But in a way, the 15th day of Av is greater. So all these days are 15, which is the full moon, which, as we've spoken in the past, the Jewish people are compared to the moon. But the 15th day of Av has extra special joy because we're coming from the great sadness of the 9th of Av, when you're coming from such a low, when we come to the high, it's even greater than the heights of the biblical Yom Tov, the biblical holidays of Pesach and Sukkot. The 15th day of Av is a day that we also add in studying Torah, because in the northern hemisphere, it is the nights start getting longer. Summer solstice, and the nights start getting longer. So now it's more time to study at night. I would say, I'll venture to say that in our hemisphere, now the days are getting longer, so maybe now it's more time to study during the day. But that's what the Talmud establishes. It's a day that we start learning more, and it also really starts the preparation time for the upcoming high holidays, which don't scare anyone. But there's just over 6 weeks now till Rosh Hashanah.
Why scare?
Well, it's a new year. It's the year. It's going to be the year. It's going to be the year. So,
Passover.
Yeah.
That's scary. Fine.
That's
So-
scarier than.
And the traditional
More preparation.
Yeah.
the traditional words of greeting that we give to Rosh Hashanah is Ketiva v'Chatima Tova, which means Kesiva v'Chatima Tova, which means it may be signed and inscribed and sealed for a good new year.
Yeah.
And we start doing that at this point 6 weeks before Rosh Hashanah,
Is that a bit like when you in Israel and I say Good Shabbos on a Wednesday?
something like that. Fine, let's go a little times now. We have 10 minutes. Let's speak a little bit about the name of the parsha and the first part. We said there's Eikev, which means when you will listen. There's Eikev meaning a heel, and thirdly there's Eikev meaning Ikvasa the Mashiach, the end time before Mashiach. When you will listen to what God wants, connected to the heel. How's it connected to the heel? Now, some people take a comparison between the head and the heel. The head is intellect, understanding, comprehending, thinking. The head is important, right? Just understand. The heel is just doing. Because the heel is the most coarse, dead part of the body. If you want to stick your foot into the water, your hot water first, what do you stick in? You stick your heel.
Another idea is that heel adds stability to your whole body.
So many people think mitzvahs which are head mitzvahs, those are important to do. Mitzvahs which are the big important ones. The small ones, which as the expression goes, you tread on with your heel, that's not so important. I don't have to keep that. I don't have to worry about that as much. The big ones are important. The Parsha is telling you that when you will keep the heel mitzvahs just as much as you keep the head mitzvahs, when you keep the ones which are not so important the same way you keep the ones which you feel are, the ones you understand, the big ticket items, then you're going to come to the end times. Then you're going to have Mashiach's coming. Another. Let's frame it a little bit differently. Some people think that it's more important to understand what you're doing than to do it. It's more important, as the Rabbi spoke in a sermon on the Shabbos, it's more important to understand the meaning and the esoteric understanding and the concepts, and you can fully understand it and appreciate it, and then you come around to doing it. What this Parsha is telling you is that specifically the things first you do is go ahead and do it. You jump in and you do it. Then you obviously have to come to understand it. You have to come to learn about it. You can't just stay by doing it. Let's say you have a choice. Either you study about the laws of tefillin, or you put on the tefillin, or you study the meaning behind lighting the Shabbat candles every week, or you actually light the Shabbat candles every week.
So you can use an analogy of teaching a child. You don't, when they're little, you get them to do things they don't understand why they're doing it, but then eventually as they get older, they get the understanding.
A child,
yeah.
That's on a child level. And then on an adult level, there are many times that you can know the right thing to do, but if you don't actually get around to doing it and committing to doing it and going ahead with it, it will remain on an intellectual level. There was a point that the Rebbe pushed strongly that they should. This was in the 1950s, that they should only learn in the Chabad school in New York. They should only learn Jewish studies, at least till the age of 9. They shouldn't learn any secular studies, not English, not maths. Just learn Jewish Judaic studies. And there was quite a bit of pushback from the newly immigrant Hasidic families. These are regular. This was the community, and there was quite a bit of pushback. They were just newly immigrant from Russia, and they didn't, they wanted their kids to get a job, have financial stability, and it's very nice in theory to not only learn Torah, but how are they gonna succeed in life? And there was one rabbi who took it on himself that he was going to actually make it happen, and he's going around trying to convince other parents to put their kids in this new cheder that he opened up with just Torah studies. And people told him, "What, you think you're like Binyamin Kletzker? Who was the story of Binyamin Kletzker? Binyamin Kletzker was a chassid 200 years ago, who was a very, very successful businessman. At the same time, he was a very, very, very devout, involved chassid. They said about him is that one time he was selling a wagon full of lumber, of logs, and he started thinking about the idea of the unity of God, that God is one. And he got so busy in thought, he didn't realize what was going on, and was on the wagon, and the horses were just going with the lumber, and he was in his thoughts. So someone asked him, what, in the middle of the marketplace, you're thinking about the oneness of God? He's like, some people, in the middle of saying Shema, when you're talking about the oneness of God, thinking about the marketplace. I have the reverse. So he was a very interesting character. And they say about him that one time he was making the calculations of his business, making all calculations, and he came to the subtotal, he came to the total, he made the sum, and he wrote the words, Ein Oid Movada, which mean there is nothing besides for God. Now, he wasn't faking it. He had been making the calculations. He was very involved in his business. He knew exactly. He was very successful. He was a rich merchant. But at the end of the day, what mattered to him, the sum total, the bottom line was, Ein Oid Movada, there's nothing besides for God. So back to our story in the 50s in New York, he said, do you think you're like this Binyamin Kletzker? You think you're that you're holding on that level to be completely after all the business and after all said and done, understanding that God is only real existence? You think you're there? How could you be demanding from us to put our kids in no general studies? Like, we're not holding that level. So he said, I might not be at that level, but I want to be there. And every parent wants the best for their kids. If you want the best for your kids, you want to be holding at that level. So even if you're not actually there yet, you haven't actually reached that within your heart of hearts, in your action, you have to set your goal to your highest goal. Now, this is a little bit abstract because it's a story in the 50s and in that set of circumstances, but every person in their life can have that point and counterpoint. You have to have set the goal of where you want to go, where you want to reach in life, even if you don't necessarily practically think right now I could be there, right now I could reach that, right now I could reach that stage in my Jewish observance. You have to set the goal. You have to set what in Hebrew it's hanacha, which means what is my perspective? What is my where am I driving at? Where am I going towards? You have to set it. What's the right thing? What's the right thing for me to do? Oh, I'm not there yet. Not yet there. Okay, I have to work towards there. Every person has their mission, has their travel, has their journey towards their goal. But if you don't set the goal in the first place, in a high goal or the correct goal, which every person in the heart of hearts knows what the right thing for them should be, then you'll never get there. If you haven't put that as the marker, as that, you haven't established that, you'll never work towards that. Am I being a bit clear? So that ties back to this parsha, that yes, the working hard is important, but you also have to have the end goal. You have to know that Eikev is the Mashiach, the time of Messianic era, when everything will be the way it's perfect. You have to have that as your as your signpost. Where am I reaching to? Where am I striving towards? And that will eventually affect back to your head and your heel on your day-to-day. Any questions? Comments?
Just a comment.
Comment?
So we came out of desert for nothing. We are not supposed to live in this land and know how to serve God while we're working on the land.
Of course we are meant to know.
Well, so like,
So
what's
you
the
need
point
to
of
study agriculture, you need to study meteorology.
So that's why we go back to the manna. Not necessarily is all the things you're sticking, all the studies we're doing.
They're in a desert, my friend. When we come out of the desert, we need to have bread on our
So
table.
the manna in the desert teaches us that when we enter the land, it says there's a story that there was the new style back in Europe was to get galoshin, which are, I'm not saying it in English, rubbers on your shoes for the mud. Yeah, I don't know, you know the word galoshin. It was the new mode. Rubber boots, very good. It was a really new fancy. It was a really new fancy thing. It was a really new fancy thing in Russia. And one time, one of the Rebbes made a comment. He says, "Shoes in galoshin, shoes in rubber boots I've seen. How about a cup in galoshin? Your head in rubber boots. This is a new one."
Yeah.
Of course, you have to get your feet dirty. Of course, you have to get involved in the world. The question is, where's your head? What are you focusing on?
And heal, because you have to keep going. And if you constantly not looking into things that we are having, it's from God, opens to us all these ways He created this world, because that's what natural law is for us, then you're closing your eyes on many things. And
So
the more you study,
this discussion,
the more you see it.
this discussion of Judaic or secular, that's a discussion for itself. I'll just bring out the idea that you have to, whatever it is to you is your purpose and you're striving for, you have to make sure to have that in your mind.
You cannot teach people if you're not among them. We were taught with Abraham when he asked where these people living among in Sodom. Remember?
Yes.
He didn't ask where was that exact shul there. He asked, are they living among? So we need to learn how to live among people. That's all it is to it. Not neglecting anything. You know, the same way we promise that we'll do and we'll listen. You'll do, you light the candle. Learn about it.
Of course.
And it's a whole thing with the same system. We do and we still do.
My main point I was trying to get to is that you have to properly evaluate and align your goal, and only that way will you ever reach there. If you don't sit down and think about what is your goal in life, it's really true in everything. I'm bringing it in Torah and in mitzvah observance and in Judaism, but it's really true in everything. You have to actually, what would you want for your children? The best possible way. Then, slowly but surely, you can work towards it. If you don't have it in your head, you will never get there. You will never work towards that because it's not there. If you haven't,
or you work towards what you appears to you as a goal, to find out that it was a fool's errand. Like you focused on the wrong, it created something that wasn't important. And that could be an example, but people strive to have lots of goals in their lives that might not necessarily, and they ignore their health. It's like that.
It's true in many realms.
And then you realize, oh, maybe I should have focused on something simpler.
Listen, AI is coming, and with that, we'll have very different. Well, we'll have time to do very many different things with our lives.
Thank you, Scott.